And I remember one night, my eyes were closed and I was going to sleep, and I seen his face, my cousin's face. He was like my best friend, and it was getting closer. And I was like, oh no, this is not him. It was his face, but I knew it wasn't him. And so I would say at that moment, that's when a lot of things changed, because I was constantly like, show me you're here. Like, I'm so desperate. I need your presence. I need something to like make me feel okay. But later on, I found out I was inviting like spirits to kind of like mess with me, and I didn't know something like that. But like when I woke up, my dog was growling in my face and I couldn't move, and I started praying.
Welcome to episode 1 of TKOF, Totally Killing Off Fear. My name is Tajon Waters, the creative director and founder of Abba and Me, who is bringing you this series. Make sure you check us out at abbaandme.com. Okay, I wanted to create a series based on getting to know God through how we overcome fear, right? And this entire show is based on deep diving into fear. Like what is fear? Fear is the emotion that recognizes danger, right? Now, the interesting part is that the first time that fear shows up in the timeline of humanity, the danger that we see is God. We are afraid that God, Adam and Eve specifically, were afraid that God did not make them like himself. Thus, they feared, and then they rebelled against God in their fear. Out of their fear came control. I must control this situation. And they not just sinned against God, but they sinned against the entire humanity. And now all of us are sort of in this replayable domino effect of misunderstanding and not trusting, not knowing who God is, and fearing that he is not good. Like, initially, we don't come into relationship with God in this world. We are separate from God, and we have to learn to trust him, right? And I want to know, what are the stories? What are the wisdom? What are the experiences that come with learning who God is that overcomes these fears? Our experiences, our traumatic experiences, can create like a hooded lens of how we see the world, how we see people, relationships. And God often wants to renew the way that we see the world, the way we see relationships, the way we see him. But our traumas can be used by the enemy, be used against us to keep God's goodness at bay and to keep us untransformed by his goodness, his hope. I guess we have to learn to trust that God is in control of the things that we wish that we were in control of. So that's what this show is about. I want to go deeper into people's lives and understanding what are the experiences that came with you understanding who God is. In those stories, as you learn who God was, how did he help you overcome your fears, your sins? So welcome to episode 1. Let's go into it. The Lord says in the book of Hosea that my people perish for lack of knowledge, right? Because they have a lack of knowledge of godly things, they don't obey. They don't love God. They have a different understanding of who God is. And that can happen often with people who aren't saved and people who are saved. We can have an idea of who God is that is so far from the truth that it keeps us from approaching him, from obeying him, from loving him. And it keeps us from joy, being in our relationship with Jesus. I mean, I haven't heard any woman who's ever secure in a relationship with someone that she doesn't enjoy. It's the same thing for children of God. If we don't find that we can trust him or be secure in him due to his character, then we will have no joy. So in this episode, meet Karina. She tells us about her experience and her God.
I grew up thinking and learning that God didn't like if you didn't wear a skirt, or if you cut your hair, or if you painted your nails. So basically, if I did any of those things, I was going to hell. Even little minor things. So if I like randomly bite my tongue, they're like, well, the Lord is punishing you for whatever you're thinking. And so I always like grew up thinking of God as like a vengeful God and a punishing God, and not a loving God that I know now, which even when I was younger didn't sit right. If something didn't make any sense, I was like, so you're serving a God that basically doesn't like anything. He doesn't like anything that you're doing, and no matter what, you're always going to go to hell, you know? And I was like, I couldn't grasp why he cared whether I had my nails painted. I couldn't grasp why I was going to hell for something so minor, you know? And that's when I like told my mom I didn't want to go to church anymore. Like I just abruptly stopped going, and I would pray, and I knew that there was a God, but I didn't really know like whether I wanted to serve this God or how that even looked. And I didn't really want to dive deep into finding out who he truly was. I took them for their word at it. And at that time, that's when I just kind of belonged to the world. I was doing a bunch of crazy things, partying, drinking, smoking, like literally just living my life without thinking about any type of consequence, without thinking about just what I'm doing to myself. I'm stubborn. I don't like being told what to do. And so that was one of the issues, was the Lord, even when I was far away from him, he was showing himself in every situation and trying to take me away from the situations that I was putting myself into, right? So a lot of us do not like to be alone. We don't like, we always need someone. We need to feel loved. We need to feel like we're cared for. We need to feel like we're not alone in this world. And so at that point, when we feel like that, we settle for anything. And while I was settling for anything, for the love of a man, and despite how much that was a toxic relationship, despite how much it was painful, like hanging on to that, I rather deal with that pain than be alone. And he was always showing me red flags, like, walk away, I don't want this for you. And like, I knew that I heard that and still forced a way to make these things happen. Like, oh, my thoughts are just crazy. Like, I thought they were my thoughts, but it was really him speaking to me like, I don't want this for you. I don't want this for you. I don't want this for you. And I spearheaded into those things that he didn't want for me. And I would dismiss his voice as my own, and like, I'm going crazy. Like, this is insane. You know, like, just do it. You can change this person. You can do this. You can do that. And in the midst of all of that, I realized that he was always in the middle of everything, trying to save us from ourselves, because we're the ones that like put ourselves in these situations because of our free will. You know, we think we know what's best. We think we can change people. We think we can do whatever it is for any situation to change the outcome. And he already knows the outcome. And he's like, no, I already know how this is going to end. Let me take care of that. You don't need this person. You don't need that. You have me. You know, like, you're going to see that this person's not worth your time or whatever it is. And I can show you what true love truly is. And so when I started realizing how stubborn I was, and realizing that I was doing damage to myself instead of just kind of being completely surrendered, and seeing that when I do finally surrender, like, my life would have changed a lot sooner, and I could have saved myself from a lot of hurt. But I think there are specific moments that he allows to happen so that when you are ready, like, you can see his love, his care, his mercy on your life, you know, his grace. I mean, honestly, there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. You just see all the ways that you could have avoided the messes that you put yourself into. I lost a cousin who was hit while he was riding his motorcycle. Somebody took the red light. When we were gathering, and not for his funeral, but we were just gathering as a family, it was like a night before, and I was praying. I was like, show me that you're here. Show me that you're here, just to bring me comfort. I didn't know that asking for a sign was not really asking that person for a sign, but it was inviting dark spirits to be like, yeah, I'm here. Like pretending to be that person. And I remember one night my eyes were closed and I was going to sleep, and I seen his face, my cousin's face. He was like my best friend, and it was getting closer. And I was like, oh no, this is not him. It was his face, but I knew it wasn't him. And so I would say at that moment, that's when a lot of things changed, because I was constantly like, show me you're here. Like, I'm so desperate. I need your presence. I need something to like make me feel okay. But later on, I found out I was inviting like spirits to kind of like mess with me. And I didn't know something like that. But like when I woke up, my dog was growling in my face and I couldn't move. And I started praying. And I'm like, at that time, I wasn't really in a praying person, but it was like, oh, just come, like, help me, like, whatever's happening, God, I just need you to show up. And then I fell asleep.
Okay, let's have a talk. Visitations from the dead are not good. Visitations from the dead are not good. Visitations from the dead are not from God. Before you come at me about your auntie, your uncle, your cousin, let's talk about it. The Bible says that to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. In Hebrews, it also says that when a man dies once, he then faces judgment. Okay, so we know that the human spirit does not have the authority to linger between the natural realm and the spiritual realm. He has no authority. He is subject to judgment. Okay, so if that is true, and since that is true, actually, why do people experience ghosts? Or why do people experience visitations from dead people? Now, we're not talking about dreams. We're talking about physical visitations, just as Karina explained. Now, someone may bring up the scripture when Saul uses the witch doctor to bring Samuel back from the dead. First off, he wasn't supposed to do that, which is why when Samuel was brought back up in that visitation, he cursed Saul. And I believe that God allowed that to happen because he was bringing Saul into further judgment, because Saul was off the hinges so much, looking to fill the voids of himself. He was not waiting on God. He was not looking for God. He was looking for control. And in our grieving, we have to be careful with how much we are willing to try to control this grieving by reaching back out to the person that we are missing. So much so that we allow the enemy a foothold. He will fabricate and manufacture a relationship for your desperation to fit. Grieving the loss of someone is real, and allowing the Lord to comfort us in that place of desperation can also be a reality for us. But we have to learn to be desperate for him, or else we open the door for other things.
The next day, I went to that family gathering, and I was telling my little cousin, I was like, hey, like, last night was crazy. You know, I seen Max in my dreams. And, you know, like, I was just telling her about everything that happened. And from across the room, I hear, what did you say? And my aunt sounded very angry. My aunt is actually a pastor in Pennsylvania. And she's like, what are you saying? And I was like, I didn't swear. That was my first instinct. Right. I didn't swear, I promise. Like, I don't know what you're mad about, but I promise I did not swear. And she was like, what were you telling her? And I was like, well, I was just telling her that last night, I try to find comfort, and I was asking Max to show me that he's there. And she freaked out. She was like, everybody get up, hold hands, start praying, don't stop no matter what's happening. And I was like, what? That's weird. what's going on here? You know, like that's never happened before.
Right, what's going on?
Yeah, like, okay, what are you doing? Like, I don't know what you're doing, but you need to chill. Like, it's not that serious. And she was asking me, what time was it? And I was like, I don't know. It was like 3:20, 3:15. And that's the trigger point. That's when she made everybody get up. And she's like, hold hands, pray, and don't stop holding hands. Don't stop praying no matter what happens. I was like, what's going to happen? Like, you're crazy. Like, something's happening. Like, I don't know what's going on. But like, clearly something's wrong. Like, I don't know what's going on with you. And so we're praying. And I didn't know how to pray. I'm just like, yes, God, like, be here. You know, because you're so far away from him. You don't really know what to say, especially to a God that you're not close to, that you know nothing about. Like, how do I pray? So I was just there. I was like, yes. And I was trying to like listen to what they were saying so that I can say something similar. And I was just like, yes, just come. Yeah, yes. Just come into this room. Yes. And at that point, I was hearing doors slam. Like the dogs were growling at us. The house phone is ringing. And this is a time where nobody was calling house phones. Like, this was 2013. So cell phones were pretty much a thing back then still, right? And all the things, cops showed up in the back door. Like, it was so weird. And my aunt started speaking in tongues. And I was just like, the last time I heard that was when I was growing up in church, and I didn't know anything about tongues at that time. Suddenly everything calms down. And my aunt's like, okay, like everything's fine now. And my aunt goes, did anybody understand what I was saying? In my mind, I was like, you're speaking in tongues. Like, who understands that? That's literally my thought. I was like, what? Like, who understands anybody that speaks in tongues? But my cousin, she goes, you were talking about Karina. And I was just like, what do you mean? Like, that's weird. And she goes, yeah, that they're fighting for her life. And I was like, I don't know what that means. And she was saying that the darkness and the light are both fighting for my life, but the darkness is winning. And I was like, what? Like, that's when things started becoming clear. And I was like, I don't know what that means. And my aunt goes, they're winning? And my cousin goes, you said that they're winning. And I was just like, excuse me? Like, what does that mean? Like, what do you mean that they're winning? Wow. And it was because of the type of life that I was leading, right? So like, I had a boyfriend at the time, and we were drinking and smoking all the time. We were doing whatever we wanted, living in sin, just thinking that we're fine. Like, you know, like we're doing what everybody else around us is doing. We're not, sinning more than anybody else, right? So I was like, why would I be a target? And it's because the Lord had a calling on my life. So there was a battle that I didn't know was happening until that day. But guess what? I still was doing whatever I wanted. And that's when I was spearheading into still doing whatever I wanted, because I thought I knew what was best. And the Lord was still trying to make a way. And that's when I started getting closer to the time where I finally surrendered to the Lord. That's when the enemy started coming closer. It's almost like he knew that I was shifting away, that in my spirit, the Lord was taking me away, because there was times where I would go clubbing and I'm like, I don't like this. Like, it's dark in here. And weird things like that started happening randomly, not like something grand happened. It was just like, I don't feel like I belong in this place. It was a huge shift. It was like I was in San Diego when that happened. I was clubbing and I was just like, yeah, no, like this is really dark. I don't want any part in this. And I wasn't in church. I wasn't praying at that time. And then
it was just your humanity, just like,
yeah, like my spirit was seeking the Lord, and I didn't know that. And the Lord was like, I'm coming. Like, don't you worry. Like, your time is coming. And I didn't know any of that, but my spirit was looking for the Lord, and it won't find any comfort in anything else. I would say in 2015, when I was at my very lowest, that's when the Lord was like, that's enough. Like, it's time for you to like come to me and start serving me, which is a crazy story in itself. I was in my room, and it was in the middle of the night, and I was dealing with like one of the darkest nights that I've ever had. There would be times where I didn't want to go to sleep because the enemy would be waiting for me in my dreams, but I didn't want to stay awake.
The devil.
The devil. He was like, he was tangibly even in my room, right? So where he would be like, you can go to sleep and I'll be there, or you can stay awake and I'm gonna be right here on your bed. Like, you choose, but you're not escaping me. And
this is in like reality.
this is in reality. Yeah, I was just sitting there and I was like so consumed by darkness, such a tangible darkness, that I started praying. Like, I was like, Lord, I need you to come. You need to come now, because like I can't handle everything that I'm dealing with mentally. Life was a mess and I put myself in that situation. I 100% like belong there because of everything that I did, you know? And I would say after I was praying and crying, I'm literally crying out for the Lord, I received a text message from a friend who was a believer. And he's like, I feel led to pray for you. What's going on right now? I was just like, what? Like, what's happening here that you're texting me in the middle of the night? Because that's what it was, literally in the middle of the night. And he's asking me how he needs to pray for me. That was the Lord, obviously, because this person never, one, texts me in the middle of the night. Two, like, never asked me what I need prayer in. So that's how I knew that the Lord really was being intentional. That despite me 6 months prior completely saying that the Bible wasn't true, I literally said that the Bible was a storybook for children back then. You know how we have like storybooks to help kids go to sleep? I said to several people that that's what the Bible was. And it's funny how 6 months later, the Lord was like, joke's on you, because I'm going to prove that like this is real. I'm real. My word is real. And this is not what you're going to live your life off of, which is insane to me. But, you know, like, he has a sense of humor and he's always intentional and showing us like who he is. So it's just interesting on how he works out in the little things and reveals himself even when we're so far from him, even when we reject him, even when we want nothing to do with him. Mostly because sometimes we think about what we need to give up in order to be able to serve him. That's why a lot of people don't do it. That's why I didn't do it. I was like, I don't want to give up having fun, whatever fun was at that time. I don't want to give up all of these things just to serve a God that I don't really know existed at that time, you know? And so I was just like, no, like, why would I want to give up that just for this, for a boring life, you know?
On my best days, I'm a good friend, I'm a good lover, I'm a darn good creative, and I give some pretty good advice. But on my worst days, I need that advice. I need that encouragement. I need to look at my creations and have them remind me of something good inside of me. I need to be seen. I need forgiveness. Whether on my best or worst day,
Stop looking at me.
I know one thing. I'm just a vessel. And in this life, I need all the created grace that God bestows upon those who follow and love Him for the days ahead and behind me.
I didn't know much about spiritual warfare when I was growing up. And even as I was dealing with things in my like mid-20s, right before I came to the Lord, I didn't really know what was happening. I just felt, you know how people are like, oh, like there's bad spirits. And then like, no, there's demonic spirits. They're here, they're real. And I didn't know how to really deal with any of that, right? So basically, I remember there was a time where the Lord was like, get off social media. And I was like, no, I'm just gonna keep mindlessly scrolling, whatever. And it was like, get off social media. And I was like, no, I'm still gonna do whatever I want. And I'm like scrolling through social media. And then I seen something that triggered me. And it was like one of the things that constantly triggered me. And that's why I told you to get off social media. So I turned off my phone. I have all my lights off. And I'm like, all right, Lord, I'm yours. I don't really want to worship. I really don't want to talk to you right now. I'm not in a mood for anything. So I just put worship music on, and I was just standing there letting the worship music play. And then I would say after like 30 minutes, I started finally getting into it, and I started like freely worshiping, pressing in, praying. And then suddenly I hear, "Do not be afraid." And I was like, what? Like, I heard it so tangibly, and it's like, don't be afraid. Do not cower. And I was like, I don't know. That was like a warning. And I was like, I don't know what that means. Like, what do I do right now? And suddenly my dog gets up from sleeping. He starts slamming his bowls and his food all over the floor. The people upstairs are going at it. They're fighting, throwing furniture. Like, things are going nuts. My worship music stops playing, and I feel like something's in the room with me. And I was like, oh no. And I turn around, and the Lord's like, do not be afraid. And so I felt like I was surrounded by just like complete darkness, like something that I normally would cower to. I felt bold, and I was like, wait a minute, this is not where you belong. Like, this is the Lord's house. And so I prayed loud. I'm screaming. I'm telling it to get out, because like, this is the Lord's dwelling place. And internally, I wanted to cower. Internally, because it's so consuming. It's so dark. It's so tangible that I'm like, I don't want this. I don't want any part of this, like, at all. Like, just go away and leave me alone, Like, I don't want any problems. But I prayed in the authority that the Lord gave me, right? And he gave me that boldness to be able to pray and get whatever was in my place out. And I kid you not, after I don't know how much time, maybe like 20 minutes of praying, of screaming around my house, my dog suddenly lays down. The people upstairs are quiet, and the worship music starts again. And I was just like, what just happened? And he reminded me, he was like, you've been praying for boldness. And you've been praying for like your future self, so that like nothing can make you, like tremble. Nothing can shake you. Well, I'm helping you become that person by doing these little things, by allowing certain things to come into your house. But you have to remember that they have to ask me permission before they are allowed to do anything to you. So they can't touch you. They have no authority. You have the authority. And you tell him to get out. And I'm like, okay. Like, he's told me that he's preparing me for the future. And this is why I say what I say, is because Jesus told Peter, the devil has asked to sift you. He's asked me permission to sift you. But I am praying for you so that you get strengthened by this, and then you go off, right? And you teach others, you tell others about what I've done, right? So like, basically Jesus is like, hey, like, this is about to happen, but they have to ask me permission because I have authority. They can't do anything to you, right? But I'm doing this so that you can gain all the strength that you need so that you can strengthen others. And so like, I feel like that's why he's allowed me to experience some things that a lot of people either haven't experienced or they don't talk about. And I've seen that even being open about these stories and dealing with like demonic spirits, I've been able to help people who have not spoken a word about it, but have dealt with it. But they don't know what to do. They don't know what to say because nobody else has brought it up. And I've had that last month. Someone, I was just casually telling her, because she's new to church and she's a new believer and she's experienced those things. And I didn't know until after I was just open about things that I've experienced. And she's like, are you kidding? She's like, I've dealt with these things, but I don't know how to bring them up. Nobody ever brings them up. And I was like, that's an issue. We should always be open about God's work. And even if it's controversial, even if people don't believe you, the truth is still the truth, right? People don't believe the Bible, but it's still the truth. It's God's living word. So whether they believe it or not, it doesn't mean that it's not true. And so I believe that he's allowed me to experience these things and talk to other people that need to hear it so that they can be strengthened. She didn't know about the whole Jesus talking to Peter and saying like the devil like wants to sift you. He's asked me permission to sift you to be strengthened. She didn't understand that whatever she's going through is going to strengthen her so that she can strengthen the next person. We are going through things specifically for that. He wants us to pour into other people. He wants us to tell our experience to other people. He wants people to be strengthened by that, right? Because there will be a time we will be persecuted, and we need to stand in boldness. We need to stand in truth, and we can't be shaken. And this is a way to basically prepare. So it's like, if we can't stand against this, then imagine how much more when we are being persecuted. So I know it's controversial, but in the Bible, it does talk about that. And when he did with Job too, I mean, like, the devil has to ask permission. He has no authority over anybody. They can only go so far. And the Lord will say when enough is enough. People just kind of graze through those stories, or they don't really understand it very well. And I challenge people to kind of like really study into that. Really look into it and see what the Bible meant. So like, do a study on things like that so that you can better understand, you know, instead of just kind of dismissing it. I don't want to think about things like this. I don't want to deal with any of that because it makes them feel uncomfortable. Right. But we need to grow. You can't stay where you're at in comfort, just blindly dismissing certain things that are very real, like very real.
I used to be bothered by that verse because Jesus is like, yeah, Peter, the devil desires you. I'm praying for you.
Yeah, it's like, good luck.
Right. And I'm like, Jesus, I don't need you to tell me you're praying for me. I need you to tell me you're going to come through.
Yeah, right.
But what you're saying is totally correct. Because when you look at the rest of Peter's life, he was definitely challenged by his own sin, by the world around him. But he wound up dying on an upside down cross because all those things prepared him to endure.
Right.
You know, because at first he wasn't an endurer like that.
No, we're all Peter in a certain way. We're like, we run from scary things. We're like, oh no, like, don't kill me. I don't know who Jesus is. Like, we're all like that at one point or another. But like, again, he was merciful towards Peter. He forgave Peter. He showed him endless love, and still look at what the things that Peter did for the kingdom, despite denying him 3 times, right? Like, he walked with him for 3 years, still denied him, and was still used. So there's so much mercy, so much forgiveness, so much love. And like, the Lord really kept pouring into Peter, kept using Peter as a vessel. Like, no matter how jacked up we are, no matter what we do or what we say, that mercy still comes, right? Like, even if we feel like the Lord has walked away, that's not what he's done. He's waiting for us to really dig deeper into, like, to seek him deeper. Sometimes we're still at the surface level and we're like, well, we feel like you've left us. And he's like, I'm here. You just need to dig a little deeper because you're still in the shallow part and I'm trying to take you somewhere else now, you know? And so Peter needed to learn all of those lessons, and he needed to go through everything that he needed to go through so that he can contribute like he did to the kingdom. And he made a huge impact. Imagine us. Like, he wants to use us like he used Peter. And we're no better. Like, you know, some of us are a little like worse than Peter, but he still wants to use us. We're still those vessels.
When you've known Christ and before you knew Christ, like, thinking about those things for real, how do you feel knowing that God is still willing to use you and is still willing to be there with you, even though you've done all of those things?
To be honest, it still seems unbelievable. I'm just thankful that I am forgiven. I'm thankful that he will complete his work in me, right? He's not going to just kind of reveal himself to you and be like, all right, figure life out. No, he's constantly working within, constantly helping, setting us free from things. And we're always going to be like a work in progress until we're with him and complete with him. But I would say that I'm just happy that he didn't turn his back on me. Because that's a thought where it's like, well, my time has passed. I will never get a chance again to be able to serve the Lord because I just rejected him so much. It's like, no, that's not a thing with him, which is amazing, you know, and I'm so thankful for that. And I'm just in awe because I would love to be like that. I would love to model after him. It's impossible because we're just mere humans, you know, we can't do things like that, but we can always be in surrender and try to model after him and ask him to help us in those areas, to love people who are really hard to love. like ourselves,
Right.
you know, where we don't feel like we're deserving, but he says we are.
What we learn from Karina's testimony is how understanding the character of God can lead us to a place of security. It helps us understand that we are never too gone for God to pursue us. Exactly. You know, we see Karina pretty much become this person who is so in love with God and sees that he's a relentless pursuer of his children, and he's redeeming those who cannot redeem themselves. Considering that she started out as a person who thought that God was a tyrant who didn't like anything, I think the transformation is clear that her fear of God not caring about her, not being there for her, overtaken. And I pray that your fears of God not being there for you are confronted with the truth, and that you don't allow the lie of the enemy to fester in your head in such a way to keep you from the God who is the lover of your soul. All right, before I start preaching the sermon, I'll see y'all in episode 2. Stay at his feet. Thank you for watching this video. Make sure you hit the subscribe button below. And then secondly, go to abbaandme.com. Check out our fashion line and all of our products that encourage intimacy with God and the well-being of his people.